What is up, everybody? Welcome back. And I don't just mean to the Big Five pod. I mean to college basketball because this is the Big Five 2023-2024 season preview episodes. We're splitting it up into two with the pods, but welcome. Thanks for joining us. I'm Kyle Morello, your co-host. And next to me, of course, if you're new, you're going to want to listen to this man. If you're not new to this podcast, you already know what this man is about. Jake Copestick. How we doing?
Hi, we're doing well because as you put it so eloquently,
Thank
we're back to college basketball season. But how about Kyle? Give yourself a hand. Season number two for us. Season number two for us.
you. A
We've
hand
basically
for
been
you as
at this
well.
about a year.
Yeah.
Basically been at this about a year. Season number two for us. We basically got started this time last year. We're about the year anniversary kind of the pod starting. So yeah, give yourself a little applause, a pat on the back. We're about to start season two. More importantly, we're about to get into a new format of the Big Five, another season of college basketball. I'm always so excited. I need games. I'm not like I'm looking forward to this, looking forward to that. I just want to see basketball, in person on the TV. Very exciting time. Obviously, know this is my favorite season. Kind of obviously March is the best, but my favorite season is about to kick off. Very, very excited to talk some Big Five and to talk some.
Yeah, I mean, listen, for a lot of the people listening and watching this, and to a lot of people around the country, this is the best time of year we're getting into. Uh, Obviously we have NBA on right now. I love the NBA. Not the same. Not the same. I'll follow my Knicks, but uh outside of that, I'm ready for college hoops to be on. I'll watch any college hoops game, any and every college hoops game is what I was trying to say that's on TV. Especially when it comes to these six teams in the city of Philadelphia as we start a new era of the Big Five with Drexel joining. So why don't we go over them first? We're going to go over the first pod of the Big Five. Obviously, it's split into two this year with three teams and the triple header, which of course we've talked about and we'll get into more not only in these couple episodes here previewing the season, but as the year goes on. So why don't we start with those Drexel Dragons in pod number one here? Obviously, this is a team we've not really gone over a ton, except when they played Big Five teams last year. So we're gonna do a little deep dive here. They finished 17 and 15 last year. Had a lot of key players return, pretty much everyone except for Coltrane Washington, which if you listen to the podcast last year, you know that's one of my favorite names. Cope, I know that was one of yours too. So I'm sad we don't get to talk about him this year, but they have a lot of players returning. Amari Williams, Lamar Odom Jr., Justin Moore, but not the one you're thinking of, Villanova fans. Luke House. Listen, this team has a lot of upperclassmen leadership. They're returning a lot of people. They're picked to finish third in the Colonial this year. One first place vote actually going in, which is pretty cool. And they added a few freshmen and and a transfer, notably that I'll let you get into. This is, I don't know if I want to say this is a make or break year for them, but this is definitely a year where you could see them returning to the NCAA tournament for the first time, since the pandemic era. So, Cope, I want to hear from you about your thoughts about this Drexel Dragons team in their first year of the Big Five. What do you think?
So first of all, Drexel, welcome to the Big Five. Nice to have you. Nice to have you. Even though they basically are not basically they are a city team. Nice to have them finally a part of this. It's honestly a crime that they don't play all the Big Five teams anyway. From a rivalry, budget, every travel standpoint, everything about this makes sense. First of all, happy, very very happy to hear. Happy to talk about the Dragons still, as we break all this down. But you're absolutely right. This could be the perfect storm for them to win this league. Now, Charleston won 31 games in the CAA last year. Doesn't happen by accident. And although the CAA is not a super powerful league, Drexel can certainly beat Charleston. They can certainly unseat UNC Wilmington as the two as well, and they really can win this conference. It's the perfect storm because with all the hype that Charleston gets and UNC Wilmington, Drexel is bringing back almost 90% of their production from last year. And because of that, like I said, this could be this perfect storm for them to win this conference. With everybody coming back, they have Amari Williams, one of the, if not the best player in this conference. Certainly on the defensive end, it's certainly the best player in this conference. Justin Moore is back for another year at the point. Luke House is back after coming in from a D2 school last year, shot the ball really, really well. Everybody's here. They have to shoot better from the 3-point line. Part of that, Mate Okrus had a down year, had his worst season, and his 4 years at Drexel shooting the ball from the 3-point line was just a tick over 35%. He can really be close to that 40% range. But so there's a really, really lot to like here. Not only with the defense, they have some good perimeter defenders. Jamie Bergens, who came over from Oral Roberts, can get after you on the perimeter. As long as you filter everything in the paint to Amari Williams, you can be aggressive on the perimeter and he can kind of bail you out blocking. And offensively, it's going to start and end with Amari Williams as well on the block. He can actually pass pretty well for a center. I think that's a really underrated part of his game that people don't give him credit for. And when Mateo Bruce is making threes, when a Luke House is making threes, when these guys can stretch the floor, you can give the ball to Amari Williams, and that gravity can give him some more space to work and open up a lot more stuff for them. So really, really like this Drexel team. I think they can really be a surprise in the CAA. And then I want to talk about the one guy that is coming in that
Yep.
will probably play. The lineup, there's so much depth here that I don't know if a Horace Simmons and a Shane Blakeney are going to necessarily be able to play just because of the guys in front of them. But I've always sung, the praise for Lucas Monroe. I really like him coming from Penn. Probably the shortest transfer distance ever. I would imagine there's probably not a guy, even in the D2 or D3 level, where a guy transfers schools this close to each other. I mean, it's close in D1 in proximity, but he's really going to add a lot to this team. They need to be better on the defensive end. He's going to provide that for them. He's able to guard a bunch of different positions. He's going to stick his nose in there and rebound on both ends, can play make a little bit. The ultimate glue guy. Like, I would have taken him to Temple. I said that last year when Adam Fisher came in. I said I would have taken him there solely for the fact he's going to give you 110% every time. He's going to play good minutes. He's going to give you everything he's got when he's out there. He's going to be able to help you in a bunch of different areas. So really, really like this Drexel team. Although they're picked behind the Charleston and the UNC Wilmington. Charleston was everybody's darling last year until they lost San Diego State. They have a legit chance to win this conference. They actually beat Charleston last year. I tried to get tickets and unfortunately could not. But they beat Charleston last year. And I think they can do the exact same this year. So really, really like this team. Although they're picked third, they do have a first place vote, as you've noted here. They can certainly win the CAA this year and get back to the tournament for the first time since the COVID season where they lost to Illinois in the first round.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very glad you mentioned Lucas Monroe at the end then, because if you didn't, I was going to. I think he was, I don't want to say the heart and soul of the Penn team last year, because obviously Jordan Dingle, second leading scorer in the nation. They had Clark Slacker, who's a baller, and we're going to go over later. But Lucas Monroe was a very, very important piece of that Penn team. And the last few Penn teams that have, competed with Princeton and with Harvard and Yale very closely in that conference the last few years. So bringing him in, having him probably not even move apartments. He probably staying exactly where he was. Maybe has a little bit further of a walk, but I think he'll survive. It's going to be, I think it should be a fun year for the Drexel Dragons. I really do. I think, last year there was no Big Five teams in the NCAA tournament. I think that'll change, especially with another team we're going to go over a little bit later. But I think this could be a year where there's multiple Big Five teams in the tournament. I think Drexel could be one of those teams. Yes, Charleston's still there. Yes, UNC Wilmington's still there. This team might be as good as those teams. It's a toss-up right now. We obviously see how the season plays out, but definitely a team that could be for real in the Colonial. I think the one thing that concerns me, they shot 31% from three as a team last year. Definitely going to need to bump that up if they plan on upending Charleston and UNC Wilmington in the conference, because that will be huge. And obviously you see once you get to late February and March, teams that get hot from three are a lot of times are teams that advance. So that is a key point for the Drexel Dragons this year to improve upon. So yeah, we are going to move on now to Cope, you and I's alma mater, Temple Owls. This should be an interesting year. Adam Fisher is taking over, of course, for Aaron McKee. Aaron McKee's still in the program, of course, but Adam Fisher is taking over head coaching duties, and they're completely changing the way that they're doing things. You're going to have this run and gun system, which, if you guys may have seen from when Cope and I covered the press conference, his introductory press conference, and kind of throughout the summer, these guys are going to be running up and down the floor. They're going to be shooting threes. It's going to be exciting to watch. I'm not sure they quite have the talent this year as they maybe did last year, but we're going to go over that right now. Some key returners for this Owls team: Heisier Miller, Jaleel White, Emmanuel Akpomo, and Shane Dezzoni. they had to work the portal and the recruiting class a little bit, so they brought in Quante Berry from Providence, Jordan Riley from Georgetown, Taj the Watt, who sat last year, but it was a West Virginia transfer, Steve Settle III from Howard, who I know you love, so I can't wait to hear you talk about him. Deuce Roberts, who is a redshirt freshman, Matteo Piccarelli from UMBC, who can shoot the three, and Zion Stanford, who is a freshman this year. Obviously, Damian Dunn, Khalif Battle, Jamil Reynolds, Nick Jourdain, Zach Hicks, and Kurt John Cooch all out the door. And there was a lot of talent there last year. Cope, I know the expectations probably aren't nearly as high this year as they were going into last year with all that talent I just mentioned that has since left. What do you make of not only this team this year, but the first year under Adam Fisher? What should we expect from the Owls this year?
Well, obviously they want to win games. They're very clear about that when they've been interviewed. But it's that style. I think that it's really gonna shock you, and it's really gonna be something to expect because you think about under Aaron McKee, this is a team that preached defense. They were very versatile in that end. They switched a lot. It was all about grinding games out, and when the offense wasn't there, you could rely on that defense. Not that defense is not an emphasis for Adam Fisher and his staff, but it's going to be that Micah Shrewsbury type system that he was at last year, where they're spreading the floor a lot. They're playing very fast. They're putting up a lot of threes. So the emphasis and what this team's calling card is going to be completely different from what you were accustomed to under Aaron McKee. So they brought in a lot of shooters. They had to work the portal because just about everybody left. So they bring in a Matteo Piccarelli. They bring in Steve Settle that can shoot, stretch the floor. You have a guy like Heisha Miller who can shoot a little bit. The problem is with the rest of the returners, it's like Leo White really didn't even want to shoot threes last year. Wouldn't even really look at the basket when he had the ball. Emmanuel Okpomo, you speak about his press conference. One of the funniest parts of that was he doesn't shoot threes. And Adam Fisher was like, well, get in the gym and start because you're going to. For a guy that's probably never taken a three in his college career. So that part is probably going to be it's going to take a little getting used to. Also, it's going to be a good conference. They're bringing in a lot of really good teams. FAU is coming in. North Texas was really good, even though they're not going to be the same with their head coach leaving. They did actually bring in some pretty quality teams. And it's still a conference that has some good teams in it. So the expectation, I would say, temper them because this is a whole new team, a first year, first time head coach. Not a lot coming back. These guys are like, especially with a Jordan Riley who played very seldom at Georgetown, albeit on a bad team where he probably should have got more minutes. Quante Berry, who redshirted. Zion Stanford has a spot here coming from West Catholic in one of the best high school basketball leagues in the country. This is going to be his first year. Deuce Roberts redshirted last year. There's a lot of unknowns here, so it's almost kind of hard to kind of have expectations here when there's so much unknowns. But what I would say is temper them. It's going to be a good league with some good teams at the top. New head coach. Let's temper our expectations here. Probably somewhere in that 10 to 12, maybe 9 to 12 range. In this conference is what I'm looking at. But they got to, this team has to gel. It's a whole new coaching staff. There's so many moving parts here that it's kind of hard to project even in year one, a seismic leap here for the Owls. They could probably start with one. Like Adam Fisher, long term, I think this is a bit higher. Year one, gotta let him get his feet wet, get some experience here. So temper your expectations if you're an Owls fan. At times, could be rough this year when you have to play against an FAU and a Memphis and a Tulane and SMU, who I think would be really good.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting, especially with kind of the conference remake that the Americans gone under. Obviously FAU was a phenomenal team a year ago, and now they're going to be in this conference. And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure they're a preseason top 10 team, at least top 15.
Depending on where you look, yeah, but a lot of people have them in and I think it's absolutely warranted that they're there.
Yeah, and they brought back a lot of guys too. But to kind of compare that to the rest of the American, Temple was picked to finish 12th in the American this season, which is in your 9 to 12 range too. It's going to be interesting to see how they adapt to the system. Obviously, like you mentioned, Aaron McKee had a far different system that Adam Fisher does. There's not to say that one works and one doesn't. Obviously, the results weren't really there under Aaron McKee, unfortunately, and that sucks because as Temple, one of the best Temple players to go through there, you really wanted to see him succeed. It didn't happen. But this Micah Shrewsbury system saw success, especially last year, as Penn State made it to the second round of the NCAA tournament. Adam Fisher's, been around the block a little bit. He knows that this system can work. So it'll be really interesting to see. I also don't really expect them to be anywhere near crazy competitive this year, but it will be fun to see the transition from the grit and grind defense kind of system to this run and gun. It'll be very, very interesting. Also forgot to mention for both of these teams, Temple picked to finish 170th in KenPom, or at least they're 170th in preseason KenPom, and Drexel was 107, so a little bit better. And the final team of this pod here, we got the La Salle Explorers, your first year in college spent there, of course. New arena, not here quite yet, as we mentioned last episode, but we'll be getting here for next year. But let's focus on this year. Listen, this team lost a lot, doesn't have a ton of proven depth. They did get some guys back, though. Deshaun Shepard's coming back. Rokas Yosut's coming back, who, as I think you're going to mention soon, is definitely someone to keep an eye on for this year. Obviously, we can't talk about the South Explorers team without talking about Fran Dunphy, Mr. Big Five, returning for his second year back at his alma mater as well. How can you not like Fran Dunphy leading the charge here? There were signs of improvements last year. Ultimately, didn't end up working out too well. A team that finished below 500 and got bounced, not the earliest in the A10 tournament, but fairly early. But definitely a lot of roster turnover this year. Khalil Brantley will be back, though. Jimmy Brickus will be back. They definitely have some guys who contributed last year that will definitely see the floor this year. But Cope, there's going to be some guys who are gone, like Mamadou Kore, Josh Nickelberry, the Drame twins. It's going to be a lot of lost production for the Explorers here. So how can you see them making it up and potentially taking a leap forward this coming season?
Well, to make up for the guys they lost, the two guys you bring up, Deshaun Shepard and Rokas Yosut, that's who's going to have to carry the load here. And I really want to touch on Yosut because I think not only for this team to see a breakout guy and a huge swing piece, as I kind of like to say, is he's a guy that can totally change their trajectory. Because when he had extended playing time, he was able to knock down some threes. He was able to rebound. He went toe to toe with DeRon Holmes the second when they played at Dayton and held his ground and played really well. So he's going to have to step into that role now as a sophomore. I mean, Ducore was just almost like a buffer. He would start and maybe he'd come in at the end, but he wasn't playing like a bunch of extended minutes. They would play small with Deshaun Shepard or the Dramies in there. But with his versatility and his really unique skill set, he's really going to be big for them. They're going to need him to stay out of foul trouble. That's going to be huge. They don't have any depth behind him. And that's unfortunately a common theme with this LaSalle team is there's no proven depth really behind anybody. Andres Marrero is going to be your sixth man. And, besides being a guy who can come off the bench and knock down shots, it's not like he had a major role in this team because obviously Nickelberry was a sixth man. So it's like you have Marrero is like, hey, like on nights where Nickelberry wasn't starting, like you kind of have to be the sixth man now. So with all the production out the door, you're asking a whole lot of people who didn't have huge roles in this team last year. But as they grow in the program, you're expecting more from them. So, yeah, with Yotsu, it's going to be big. But then with Deshaun Shepard as well, he really didn't play the early part of last season. Then he got some opportunities to play. He provided LaSalle with an athleticism component that they didn't have. He was able to rebound really well, which allowed them to play smaller. You can getting out in transition. He can be a blur, and then he can defend a couple of different positions as well. So he really provided something that LaSalle did not have, a really athletic, switchable forward. You had the Dramies, but to have an athlete like Deshaun Shepard, they don't have another one on the team. They didn't last year. So to have a guy like him is huge, and he's going to be asked a lot more now. Now he's going to have a starting role for a guy who really wasn't even cracking the rotation early last year. So they're asking a lot of guys who didn't play a ton last year. And that's really who's going to have to provide you with that production that you're missing out on last year with the Dramies who were, everyday guys who could rebound, who always hustled, who just did a bunch of different things. For you both were really glue guys that could rebound, they could shoot. You miss a guy like Nickelberry who shot the lights out some nights, who's now going to play at Florida State and go back to the ACC where he started his college tenure. And you're going to replace them with a bunch of international guys, but I think is interesting that LaSalle in the era of the transfer portal and NIL, they opt to develop and build the program and go the international route with guys that have played team basketball, that have played with competition that's equal to or potentially better because they're playing essentially professional basketball overseas. With Tunde Basasi, F.A. Tamaz, and Milos Kovacevic. Are these guys going to be ready? Can they have an impact right away? I think Tunde Basasi is the guy that's going to be able to play right away as a versatile forward who can do a bunch of different things. But the point being with this LaSalle team, I think their ceiling isn't very high because you don't really know what you're getting with these guys. And they're young guys that, so young into their college career with these international guys, how much realistically can you expect from them? And because of that, I don't think this is a team that's going to have the success they did last year. They did have a nice run in the tournament. They won some games last year. I didn't think they would. They won at Bonaventure. They won at UMass when Jameer Brickus went off in the second half. They did win some big time games. And then we were 1 win away from LaSalle and St. Joe's each from seeing a crash course of LaSalle and St. Joe's for the chance to go to the A-10 championship game.
Yep.
They both went on very good runs. I don't think they're going to repeat that level of success with everything they're losing and not knowing what you're getting with some of these guys and asking a lot of guys who have lesser roles to step into bigger roles this year. But I will say this. I have concerns about like a Davidson and a Richmond losing a ton of talent in this league. Fran Dunphy will not let this team finish last. They will not be the 15th team in the Atlantic 10.
They are projected that way.
Yeah, I mean, by a lot of people, they are. And even if it's 12th or 13th, I don't think they're going to finish last in the team. Frank Dunphy's not going to let it happen. They were in games and won games that they should not have last year. Having to go to a Bonaventure or go on the road to an opponent and winning. But he's not going to let him finish last. I don't believe that for a single. So it may be a step back this year for LaSalle. I don't see them finishing in the total basement of the team.
Yeah, me neither. I mean, obviously it's concerning that they're picked to finish last in the A-10, but these rankings come out every year, these preseason polls, and every year they're wrong in some shape or form. Not that they're completely wrong, of course, but there's always something that is missing. It's hard to predict sports, believe it or not, Cope. I don't know if you've picked up on that in your 23 years of sports watching and fandom and whatnot. It's hard to predict this stuff. I don't think Fran Dunphy will let them finish last either. I think I'm not going to say they're too good of a team, but he's too good of a coach. And I think he'll be able to get the best out of everybody, including some of these international guys who we don't know what they're going to be. These aren't Victor Wembanyama's. That's coming to play LaSalle. These are unknown guys, pretty much. So it's gonna be really interesting to see. They do have a lot of talent that they're gonna have to replace here. One person I did want to ask you about though is potential. Obviously he was one of the better players last year too, but as an X factor this year to be the number 2, I guess, Jameer Brickus. What do you expect from him this year? Because obviously Brantley's gonna take the bulk of the scoring load, as we know, and he was, phenomenal last year. But what do you make of Brickus heading into this season?
Yes, I mean those are your top 2 guys. They were last year. Like that's the engine that makes this team go because there's really not a whole lot of other creators on this team that can get their own, that can create offense for others. It's really just Jameer Brickus and Khalil Brantley. So for Jameer Brickus, he had really, really good games. The game at UMass, I believe he had 26 in that game. He couldn't miss it in the second half, and he willed them to a win there. Even as a little guy, he's going to bring it every night, but he's going to have to, believe it or not, like be more aggressive because there's not a whole lot of creation on this team. He's going to have to be the Robin to Khalil Brantley's Batman, or get paint touches as much as possible. Shoot the 3 when it's open. Try and get to the bucket when you can. Find open shooters. Get the ball down low to Yotsus. Like he's going to have to be asked to do even more than last year because this team will go as far as Khalil Brantley and Jameer Brickus taken. Oh, that was basically his role last year, was to be the number 2 and to be the running mate with Khalil Brantley. Not to say he's so much more below him. Those 2 were right. 1A and 1B. They're really, really good duo. They're little guys, but as I always say, last year I said a million times, good luck staying in front of them. They're little guys, but they're quick, they're sudden, they can get by you and get in the paint. create for themselves. So he's going to have to do that at an even higher level this year simply because they're going to need it. There's not a whole lot of other guys on this team that can do that. They're going to need him even more than they did last
Yeah, I definitely agree, especially with someone like Josh Nickelberry, who's not going to be there, who probably going into the year last year was expected to be their 1A to Brantley. Obviously, he ended up being a sixth man by the end of the year and was still, of course, good. But it'll be interesting to see what happens this year with this LaSalle team. Definitely a little bit different than last year. I'll say that, but uh, doesn't mean they'll be bad. Like we both say, Fran Dunphy, I don't think we'll let that happen. All right, Cope. Any final thoughts on this pod? Maybe a team who you think is going to be the best one of the three. Any final thoughts here?
either Temple or Drexel, but I'm actually really tempted to say Drexel. They played Temple close last year, and then they won at La Salle. I don't see a reason why Drexel can't be playing for the first place game here. So I think I'm actually going to roll with the Dragons, but Temple right on their heels because I do think they'll be exciting. And I think of, behind Amari Williams, like the second best player in this pod's Heisher Miller that we should definitely have touched on because he was good last year. He produced when a Caliph battle stepped away from the team. He showed really, really good flashes of brilliance on both ends, especially defense, being tuned in and picking up at half court and full court in his first season as a starter. So he's going to be the engine that makes his team go as well. I mean, he's the top dog. It's crazy to have Heisher Miller. Last year it was like, okay, he's a sophomore. He's now starting now, but he's with Damian Dunn and a bunch of these other guys that had been at Temple and had been in college for a while. And now he's the elder statesman here. How quickly his role has changed within a year, both leadership wise and on the court, that I think will be a pretty interesting development in the Big Five and for Temple here. But for me, it's between Drexel and Temple. But in year one, in the Big Five, I think Drexel's actually going to be competing for first place because like I said, play Temple close at Temple. They won at LaSalle. I don't see why they couldn't do that again and beat. With Temple actually having to go to the DAC for the first time, I believe since the 80s. It's been a really long time since Temple's gone down there. So I'm going to go Drexel here.
I am as well, Cope. I think they're the best team of this pod. I don't think it's crazy to say. I know they're in the worst conference of this pod, but or Ivy League's up there too, obviously. Or they're not in this pod. I was thinking the Big Five, but yeah, they're in the worst conference of this pod. But they might be the best team in this pod. I think out of the three, they're very much the most realistic team to make the NCAA tournament. They have the best player coming back in Amari Williams. If you want to put Miller or Brantley 2 or 3, I don't have a preference of which one. I think Brantley's also really, really good too. This team's going to be exciting though. This Drexel Dragons team. I do think come December 2nd, they will be playing for the Big Five championship at the Wells Fargo Center. That is my prediction, and that is your prediction as well. So should be interesting to see what happens with these three teams. Definitely think they're pretty evenly matched overall. But I do think Drexel is the best one out of the three. So it'll be very interesting to see. That is all we got for pod number 1 of Big Five 2023-24 season preview. Of course, make sure to check out all of our episodes on YouTube. Make sure you follow on Instagram and Twitter at Big Five Pod. Make sure you listen to our audio only versions on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And as a bonus for this one, make sure you check out pod number 2 season preview, which will feature Villanova, St. Joe's, and Penn. And that's all we got for this one. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you this season.